They told me I would die in the frozen north, devoured by the beast who ruled there. Instead, I found the only creature in this world who ever truly saw me. I remember the morning my parents sold me. The frost clung to the windows of our small cottage, and my sister Maren lay in her bed, her breath shallow, her skin the color of old snow. She had been dying for months, and our village healer had finally spoken the words we dreaded. There is nothing more I can do. But there were rumors, whispered between frightened lips, of a king in the northern mountains who possessed ancient magic. A hybrid creature, neither fully man nor fully wolf, cursed to walk between worlds. They said he demanded tribute. They said those who went to him never returned. My father could not meet my eyes when he told me what they had arranged. My mother wept, but she did not stop him. I was 18, old enough to understand that love sometimes wears the face of betrayal. Maren was 22, the golden daughter, the one who had always been meant for greater things. And I was Elena, the quiet one, the strange girl who wandered too far into the forests and spoke to animals as though they might answer. Perhaps my parents thought the beast would find me familiar. Perhaps they simply thought I was the easier one to lose. The journey north took 11 days. I traveled with a merchant caravan as far as the last human settlement, a grim collection of wooden houses huddled against the wind. Beyond that, I walked alone. The forest swallowed me like a secret. Pine trees rose so tall their tops vanished into the gray sky, and snow lay thick upon the ground, unmarked by any human passage. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something I had never experienced before, a sense of recognition, as though the wilderness had been waiting for me, as though every step I took was bringing me not toward death, but toward some truth I had always been meant to discover. On the second night alone, I nearly died. A storm descended from the peaks without warning, a howling fury of wind and ice that drove me to my knees. I crawled toward a hollow beneath a fallen pine, my fingers numb, my breath turning to frost before it left my lips. I thought of Maren, and wondered if she would ever know how I had perished, alone and forgotten in the wilderness. But as the cold crept deeper into my bones, I heard something through the storm. A howl, long and mournful, cutting through the wind like a blade, and then I saw them, 2 white wolves emerging from the swirling snow. The larger one was massive, his fur scarred, and his amber eyes ancient with knowing. The smaller one, a female, pressed her warm body against mine, and would not move until the storm had passed. They led me to shelter that night, a cave hidden beneath a rocky outcropping, and they stayed with me until dawn. When I woke, they were gone, but their paw prints in the snow formed a trail leading north. I followed without question. Something in my heart told me they had been sent. I found the castle on the 3rd day of walking alone. It rose from the mountainside like something grown rather than built, its dark stone walls wrapped in ice and crawling with frozen vines. Towers spiraled toward the gray sky, their windows dark and watchful. The forest seemed to bow away from its walls, as though even the ancient pines feared to grow too close. There were no guards at the gate. No servants came to meet me. I pushed open the great iron doors myself, their hinges groaning with the weight of centuries, and stepped into a hall lit by fires that burned without wood, their flames dancing in shades of blue and silver. The ceiling soared so high above me that it vanished into shadow, and the walls were carved with images of wolves running through endless forests, their forms so lifelike I expected them to leap from the stone. And there, at the far end of that impossible room, I saw him for the first time. Kael was not what I expected. The stories spoke of a monster, a creature of nightmare and shadow. But the being who rose from the throne of black stone was beautiful in a way that stopped my breath. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body caught somewhere between human and wolf. White fur covered his arms and shoulders, trailing down his spine, and his face held features both noble and wild. a strong jaw, high cheekbones, lips that might have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that held me captive. They were gold, pure molten gold, and they burned with an intelligence and a sorrow so profound that I forgot to be afraid. A long scar ran from his left temple down across his cheek, disappearing into the white fur of his neck. He looked at me as though he had seen 1,000 women walk through those doors, as though he expected nothing from me but fear and perhaps a tedious death. "You are the tribute," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together in a riverbed. "I am Elena," I answered, and I was surprised to find my voice steady. "My parents sent me in exchange for your healing magic. My sister is dying." He descended from the throne with a predator's grace, each movement fluid and controlled. When he stood before me, I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. I could smell him then, pine and winter wind, and something darker beneath, something that spoke of blood and ancient power. "Your parents sent you to die," he said. "I do not heal. I only take." But he did not kill me that night. Instead, he had a woman named Siren show me to a chamber in the Eastern Tower. Siren was old, her face weathered by decades of service in this strange court, and she looked at me with something that might have been pity. "The king has not taken a tribute in many years," she told me as she laid fresh linens on the bed. "The last one tried to kill him in his sleep. He tore out her throat before she could drive the blade home." I asked her why she stayed, why anyone would choose to serve such a creature. Serene paused at the door, her eyes distant. "Because I remember what he was before the curse," she said. "Because someone must bear witness to what remains of his humanity." I did not sleep that first night. I sat by the window and watched the snow fall over the forest below. And I thought about Marin lying in her sickbed, waiting for a cure that might never come. I thought about my parents, who had chosen one daughter over another with the cold calculation of farmers deciding which animal to slaughter. And I thought about the king with his golden eyes and his ancient sorrow, and I wondered what kind of curse could transform a man into something so terrible and so terribly alone. The days that followed were strange and quiet. I was not confined to my chamber, so I wandered the castle freely, exploring its labyrinthine corridors and dust-filled rooms. I found a library that stretched 3 stories high, its shelves packed with books in languages I could not read. I found a conservatory where impossible flowers bloomed in defiance of the winter outside, their petals wet with dew that never dried. I found a great hall filled with portraits of men and women who shared Kael's golden eyes, their faces proud and unsmiling. His ancestors, I realized. The bloodline of hybrid kings who had ruled these mountains since before human memory. Kael himself I rarely saw. He kept to his own chambers during the day, emerging only at night to pace the battlements or vanish into the forest below. Sometimes I heard howling in the darkness, a sound so mournful it made my chest ache. Other times I heard nothing at all, and somehow that silence was worse. It was Siren who finally explained. "The king is bound to the mountain," she told me one evening as we sat by the fire in the kitchen. "His power keeps the forest alive, keeps the old magic from fading entirely. But the curse twists him. Every year he becomes more wolf than man. Every year he loses a little more of himself." I asked what would happen when he lost everything. Siren's face grew pale. "Then the mountain will have a beast for a king," she whispered, "and the beast will hunger." I found him in the library on the night of my 14th day in the castle. He stood by the window, his massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, and he did not turn when I entered. I had brought him a cup of tea from the kitchen, a gesture so absurdly domestic that I almost laughed at myself. But something compelled me to approach, to stand beside this creature who held my life in his clawed hands. "You do not fear me," he said without looking at me. It was not a question. "I fear many things," I answered, "but I am tired of letting fear choose my path." He turned then, and in the silver light his eyes seemed almost human, almost soft. Why did you truly come here, Elena? I could have lied. I could have spoken of duty and sacrifice, of a sister's love and a family's desperation. Instead, I told him the truth that I had only just begun to understand myself, because I think I was always meant to find you. Something changed between us after that night. Kael began to seek me out, appearing in doorways and corridors, his presence a warmth I had not known I craved. We walked together through the castle gardens, where stone wolves stood sentinel among the frozen roses. We sat together in the library while winter winds howled outside, reading passages aloud from crumbling books of poetry and legend. He showed me his mother's portrait, a beautiful woman with sad eyes and the same white fur that marked his own shoulders. She died giving birth to me, he said quietly. My father never forgave himself, never forgave me. We talked for hours about the books in his library and the history of his bloodline, about the curse that had been placed upon his great-grandfather by a scorned witch and had passed down through generations like a disease. The witch had loved his ancestor, Kael explained, but he had chosen a human bride instead. In her rage and grief, she had bound his bloodline to the wolf forever, ensuring that each generation would struggle between man and beast, never fully belonging to either world. He told me of the woman he had loved once, a village girl who had seemed to accept his nature until the night she drove a silver blade into his chest. Her name was Lyssa, he said, his voice hollow with old grief. She had beautiful hands. I used to watch her sew by firelight and imagine what our children might look like. He showed me the scar, a starburst of white tissue just above his heart, the flesh puckered and pale even against his white fur. She feared what I might become, he said. She thought death would be kinder than watching me lose myself. I touched the scar without thinking, my fingers tracing its raised edges, and I felt him shudder beneath my hand. His skin was warm, warmer than any human, and I could feel the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath my palm. Perhaps she was wrong, I whispered. Perhaps you were never meant to face this alone. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow did not melt so much as retreat, pulling back from the lower slopes like a tide going out. I had been in the castle for nearly 3 months when Seren brought me news from the south. Your sister lives, she said, her voice careful. The healing magic was sent the day you arrived. I should have felt joy. Instead, I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a grief for something I could not name. Maren was alive. My sacrifice had meant something. And yet the thought of returning to my family, of leaving this frozen kingdom and its broken king, filled me with a despair so profound I could barely breathe. Kael found me weeping in the conservatory that evening. He knelt before me, his great body folding with surprising grace, and he took my hands in his clawed ones. You are free to go, he said. The debt is paid. You owe me nothing. I looked into his golden eyes and saw my own reflection there, saw the woman I had become in these silent halls. I owe you everything, I said. You showed me that I was never the lesser daughter. You showed me that I was worthy of being seen. He made a sound then, something between a growl and a sob, and he pressed his forehead to our joined hands. I cannot ask you to stay, he whispered. I am a monster, Elena. I am everything your world fears. Then let me be the one who does not fear, I answered. Let me be the one who stays. The summer brought trouble from beyond the mountains. Hunters had gathered in the southern villages, men who had heard rumors of the hybrid king and his human companion. They spoke of abomination and corruption, of a girl who had been bewitched by a beast and must be saved or destroyed. I learned of their approach from a white wolf who appeared at the castle gates one morning, her fur matted with blood and her eyes wild with warning. She was one of Kael's subjects, a creature bound to him by the old magic, and she had run for 3 days to bring us news. They come with silver and fire, Kael translated, his face grim. They mean to end my line forever. I asked him what we would do. He looked at me with those ancient, sorrowful eyes, and I saw the answer before he spoke it. I will fight, he said, and I will likely die. But you must flee, Elena. Return to your family. Forget this place and this creature who loved you too much to let you share his fate. I refused. I stood before him in the great hall where I had first seen him, and I spoke words I had never imagined I would say. I am not a girl to be protected, I told him. I am not a sacrifice to be offered and then discarded. I came to you as tribute, but I stay as something else entirely. I stay as your equal, as your partner, as your queen, if you would have me. The silence that followed was absolute. Kael stared at me as though I had spoken in a language he did not know, as though I had offered him something so precious he dared not believe it was real. You do not understand what you ask, he finally said. To be my queen is to be bound to this mountain, to this curse, to whatever darkness I might become. I stepped closer to him, close enough to feel the heat of his body and hear the rapid beating of his heart. I understand perfectly, I said. I am choosing you, all of you, the man and the wolf and whatever lies between. The hunters came on a night when the moon hung full and swollen over the peaks. There were 30 of them, armed with silver blades and torches, their faces twisted with righteous fury. Kael met them at the gates in his full hybrid form, 7 feet of white fur and gleaming fang, and the sight of him sent half of them fleeing back into the darkness. But the others held their ground. Their leader was a man named Aldrich, a hunter whose own brother had been killed by a rogue wolf years before. He saw all wolves as monsters, all magic as corruption, and he had sworn to cleanse these mountains of their ancient evil. I watched the battle from the battlements, my heart in my throat, my hands gripping the frozen stone until my knuckles turned white. Kael fought like the creature he was, savage and beautiful and terrible. He moved through the hunters like a winter storm, his claws flashing in the torchlight, his howls shaking the very walls of the castle. But silver weakened him, and there were so many blades flashing in the torchlight, so many men driven by fear and hatred. I saw him fall once, a silver-tipped spear piercing his shoulder, and he rose again with the weapon still embedded in his flesh. I saw him fall twice, 3 hunters bearing him down with chains forged in blessed fire, and he tore free with a roar that echoed across the mountains. But the 3rd time he fell, he did not rise. I saw the red bloom of blood on his white fur, saw him crumple to the snow, saw Aldrich standing over him with a silver sword raised for the killing blow, and something broke open inside me. I do not know where the power came from. Perhaps it had always been there, sleeping in my blood, waiting for the moment when I would need it most. Perhaps the mountain itself reached out to claim me as its daughter. All I know is that I descended from the battlements with lightning in my veins and frost on my breath, and when I screamed, the sound that emerged was not human. The hunters turned to face me, and I saw their terror transform into something else entirely. Recognition. Awe. The same white fur that covered Kael had begun to spread across my own skin. The same golden fire that burned in his eyes now burned in mine. The curse had found a new vessel, or perhaps it had found its other half at last. I do not remember much of what followed. There was blood and screaming, the clash of silver against claw. I remember Aldrich raising his blade against me, and I remember the white wolf from the gates leaping to take the blow meant for my heart. I remember Kael rising behind the hunter, his wounds forgotten, his eyes blazing with a fury that shook the very stones of the mountain. And I remember the moment when Aldrich fell, when the last of the hunters fled into the night, when the battle was finally, impossibly over. Kael came to me in the silence that followed. He was wounded badly, his white fur stained crimson, but he moved with purpose toward where I knelt in the snow. The transformation was receding from my body, leaving me shaking and human once more, but I could still feel its echo in my bones. "You carry the bloodline now," he said. Wonder and fear mingled in his voice. "The mountain has chosen you." I looked down at my hands, still trembling, still faintly traced with white fur. "Is that what I am now?" I asked. "A monster like you?" He knelt before me and cupped my face in his great clawed hands.
"You are unchanged.
"You are what you have always been," he said. "Brave, fierce, impossible. The only difference is that now the world will see it too." We were married in the great hall on the first day of autumn, when the leaves on the lower slopes had turned to gold and crimson, and the air held the first sharp promise of winter. Sirene performed the ceremony, speaking words in an ancient language that made the very air hum with power. Words that bound not just two hearts, but two bloodlines, two legacies, two worlds that had never been meant to meet. There were no guests from the human world, no family to witness my transformation from tribute to queen. But the white wolves came, dozens of them emerging from the forest to fill the great hall with their watchful presence, their amber eyes gleaming in the torchlight as they watched their king take his bride. I recognized the two who had saved me in the storm, the great scarred male and his smaller female companion. They sat at the foot of the throne, and when I looked at them, I could have sworn the female bowed her head. I wore a gown of silver fur and winter roses, sewn by Serene's own hands, and my feet were bare against the cold stone because Kael had told me that queens of this mountain walked always on the bones of the earth. And when Kael placed the crown upon my head, a circlet of twisted silver and moonstone that had belonged to his mother and her mother before her, I felt the mountain's magic surge through me like a river finding the sea. I had been sold as a sacrifice. I had been sent to die in the frozen north. Instead, I had found a kingdom that needed me and a king who loved me, and a power I had never known I possessed. The years that followed were not easy. We faced challenges from the human world and from the wild magic of the mountain itself. There were times when Kael's curse pulled him toward darkness, and times when my own new power threatened to consume me. But we faced each trial together, queen and king, woman and wolf, two halves of a single impossible whole. I never returned to my family. I received word that Marin had married a merchant from the coast, and that my parents had grown old in their cottage by the forest. I felt no bitterness toward them. They had done what they believed necessary to save one daughter, never knowing that they were sending the other toward her destiny. Sometimes, on nights when the moon is full and the snow lies thick upon the peaks, I climb to the highest tower of our castle and look out over the kingdom that is now my home. I think about the girl I was, frightened and alone, walking into the frozen wilderness with nothing but her courage and her stubborn heart. I think about all the stories that told me monsters were meant to be feared and destroyed, and I smile because I know a truth that those stories never taught. Sometimes the monster is the one who saves you. Sometimes the beast is the one who sees your worth when everyone else has looked away. Sometimes love wears fur and fang and ancient sorrow. And sometimes the girl who was sold as tribute becomes the queen who was always meant to reign. I am Elena, queen of the northern mountains, bride of the Lycan king. I was given away as nothing. I became everything. And in the frozen halls of this impossible kingdom, surrounded by wolves and winter and a love that defies all reason, I have finally found my home.